For 20 years, a town kept a secret, not because they didn't know, but because they chose silence. A veteran Navy SEAL returned to accept an inheritance from the woman who raised him. But the forest had been waiting. Beneath a dying house, under water and wood, a truth had been sealed away by one decision, made in fear. But his dog stopped, refusing to move, as if it could feel something still waiting in the dark. The deeper they went, the clearer it became. Someone had protected that silence for far too long. And what they uncovered wasn't just the past. It was a mistake that never truly ended. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, like and subscribe to Veteran Dog Stories for more stories that stay with you. The road back into the northern forest did not welcome memory. It swallowed it. Cade Rowan drove the last mile with the engine low and steady. The way he used to move through uncertain terrain overseas, conserving noise, conserving thought. At 43, his body still carried the discipline of a Navy SEAL. Broad shoulders filling the worn driver's seat, forearms corded with quiet strength, movements economical. His face, sharp and angular, held a permanent tension at the jawline, softened only by the faint stubble that shadowed his cheeks. His deep blue-gray eyes did not wander. They measured. Beside him, Atlas did not move. The German shepherd sat upright in the passenger seat, harness strapped across his chest. Black and tan coat clean, but rugged from years of field work, 5, maybe 6 years old. Prime age. His posture was balanced, controlled, but there was something different today. His ears were forward, rigid. His gaze was not scanning the road. It was fixed, ahead. Cade noticed. He always noticed. "You smell it too?" he muttered under his breath. Atlas didn't respond. Not with movement, not with sound. But his stillness deepened. The trees closed in as the road narrowed, tall pines and birch leaning inward as if they had grown together over time to guard something. Sunlight filtered through in fractured beams, painting the dirt road in pale gold and shadow. It should have felt alive. Instead, it felt quiet in the wrong way. Not empty. Waiting. Cade pulled to a stop when the path ended. No gate, no sign, just a clearing that didn't quite feel natural. He stepped out first, boots hitting the ground with a dull, grounded thud. The air smelled like damp wood, cold water, and something older, something that had settled and refused to leave. Atlas followed, landing silently, his weight controlled, head low. Then the house revealed itself. It wasn't sudden. It didn't rise like a structure. It emerged. At first it looked like part of the forest, stone and wood consumed by creeping ivy, beams sagging under the weight of time, roots crawling over the foundation like veins gripping bone. The roof dipped unevenly. Sections of wall leaned as if exhaling. And beneath it, water. Not a lake, not a pond. A shallow, still layer of water pooling beneath parts of the structure, spreading outward in dark patches where the ground had sunk. It reflected nothing clearly. Not the sky, not the trees, just distortion. Cade stood still for a moment, reading it. His olive field jacket shifted slightly in the breeze, the fabric worn but dependable, like everything he allowed himself to keep. The red and dark blue plaid shirt beneath was buttoned halfway, sleeves rolled once, practical. His dark cargo pants carried dirt easily. His boots had seen worse terrain, but none of that mattered here, because Atlas hadn't moved. The dog stood a few feet ahead, body locked, not alert, not aggressive, paused, as if listening to something Cade couldn't hear. Atlas? Nothing. Cade stepped closer, eyes narrowing. He followed the dog's line of sight. The water, just water, still, unmoving, and yet Something about it made the back of his neck tighten. He had felt this before. Not here. Not like this. But close enough. A place that looked quiet, but wasn't. Inside the house, the air shifted. Cooler, damp, thick with the smell of rot and time. Every step creaked under Cade's weight, wood complaining beneath boots that had once crossed desert sand and steel decks. Here, the enemy wasn't visible. It was patience, decay, silence. The interior was wrong, not destroyed, interrupted. A table stood near the center of the main room, one leg uneven, the surface warped. On it, the faint outline of something once placed there. Maybe a cup, maybe a book. Left a ghost stain in the wood. A chair lay on its side nearby, not broken, just left. As if whoever had been here last didn't finish leaving. Cade moved slowly, scanning. Atlas moved differently. The dog didn't follow behind. He drifted, circling, pausing at points that didn't align with sight. Smell. Always smell. He stopped near a wall where the wood looked newer, slightly different grain, slightly less worn. Cade crouched, fingers brushing the surface. The repair was subtle. Clean. Too clean. "Someone's been here," he said quietly. Atlas gave the smallest exhale. Agreement. Cade stood again, eyes moving toward a shelf half-collapsed near the far corner. Among the debris, something caught the light. A reflective edge. He stepped over, knelt, and pulled it free. A photograph. Old. Edges curled, surface scratched. 3 figures. A woman he recognized instantly. His adoptive mother. Younger, but unmistakable. Her posture straight, her expression composed, but not warm. She had never been warm in the obvious ways. Her kindness had been measured. Precise. Next to her stood a man Cade didn't know. Tall, lean, late 50s maybe. Hair graying at the temples. His face carried a quiet intensity. Eyes sharp, focused. Not on the camera, but slightly off, as if distracted by thought. A scientist, Cade guessed. Or something close. And between them, a girl. 8, maybe 9 years old. Thin, light brown hair falling past her shoulders. Her posture was uncertain, shoulders slightly forward, as if she wasn't used to being photographed. But her eyes were fixed on the man beside her. Trust. Not forced, real. Cade flipped the photo, one word written in fading ink, Ivy. Behind him, a sound. Soft. Not wood, not wind. Water. Cade froze. Atlas reacted first. The dog's head snapped toward the far wall, toward the section where the water pooled just beyond the foundation. His body lowered slightly, weight shifting forward, not in aggression, but in focus. Then he did something Cade had never seen him do without command. Atlas stepped backward. One step. Then another. And stopped. Blocking Cade. Not letting him move forward. Cade frowned. Atlas. The dog didn't look at him. His eyes stayed locked ahead. Then, a faint shift. The surface of the water outside the wall rippled. Not from wind. Not from movement above. From beneath. Cade's chest tightened. Not from fear, but from recognition. This wasn't instinct. This was warning. The moment passed. The water stilled again. But Atlas didn't move. And Cade didn't forget. He circled the exterior of the house as daylight thinned into late afternoon. The forest shifted color, greens darkening, shadows stretching longer across uneven ground. The quiet pressed closer now, not empty, but aware. Near the edge of the clearing, he found it. A faint track. Tire marks. Not fresh, but not old enough to belong to the years this place had supposedly been abandoned. Someone had driven out here, recently. Cade crouched, fingers tracing the edge of the impression. The pattern was modern. Deep tread. Not local farm use. Deliberate. Atlas approached, nose low, inhaling slowly. Then he lifted his head, not toward the trail leading away, but back toward the house. Connection. Not departure. Return. Yeah, Cade murmured. They didn't just pass through. He stood scanning the tree line. Nothing moved. But that meant nothing. As the sun dipped, Cade returned to the main structure. The light changed everything. The house no longer looked abandoned. It looked concealed. The water beneath it reflected the dimming sky now, but still imperfectly, like a memory that refused to settle into clarity. The ivy along the walls shifted gently in the evening breeze, whispering against wood and stone. Atlas walked ahead this time, slow, measured. He moved along the outer wall, stopping at a section where moss had thickened into a heavy green blanket. The wood there looked older, softer, but something about the alignment felt off. Cade approached. What is it? Atlas didn't paw, didn't bark. He just stood there, waiting. Cade reached out, brushing aside the moss. His fingers pressed into the wood. It gave slightly. Not rot. A seam. He pressed harder. Nothing. Then he leaned closer and heard it. Faint, low, steady, water, flowing, not outside, inside, behind the wall. Cade pulled back slowly, his expression shifting, not into fear, not into surprise, but into something colder, understanding. This place, he whispered. Atlas finally looked at him, eyes steady, certain. Cade exhaled once, slow. This place isn't just falling apart. He stood, gaze fixed on the wall, on the invisible line where wood met something hidden beneath. It's built over something. The forest didn't answer. The house didn't move. But somewhere behind that wall, water kept flowing. Cade did not force the door. That alone said something about him. A younger version of him. One still living by orders, by timelines, by objectives. Would have pried it open the second he found it. But time had carved something quieter into him. Patience. Or maybe caution disguised as patience. He stood in front of the partially exposed entrance beneath the house. The damp wood panels shifted just enough to reveal a narrow gap. Cold air breathed out from the darkness below, carrying a scent that didn't belong to simple decay. Metal. Old water. And something else. Something human. Faint, but not gone. Atlas stood several feet behind him. Not tense. Not afraid. Still, the dog's posture had changed. His weight leaned backward, muscles held but not engaged. He wasn't preparing to attack. He was refusing. Cade turned slightly, glancing over his shoulder. You're not coming. Atlas didn't move. Didn't blink. That was answer enough. Cade exhaled once, slow, then crouched and widened the gap. The wood groaned, but didn't break. Someone had reinforced it once, long ago maybe, but carefully, not meant to be obvious. The opening led down to a narrow stone staircase, slick with moisture, disappearing into shadow. Cade clicked on his flashlight. The beam cut into the dark. Then he stepped in. The air changed immediately. Cooler, denser. The kind of cold that didn't come from temperature alone, but from depth. From something buried too long. Each step down echoed softly. The sound absorbed more than reflected. The walls weren't raw earth. They were shaped, smoothed in places, reinforced in others. This wasn't a cellar. This was designed. Cade moved slowly, scanning as he descended. His boots found each step carefully, avoiding the slickest patches. He didn't rush. He never rushed blind spaces. At the bottom, the staircase opened into a narrow corridor, barely wide enough for two people side by side. The ceiling hung low, forcing him to dip his head slightly. Water ran along one side in a shallow channel carved into the stone. Not flowing fast, just enough to whisper. He crouched beside it, running his fingers lightly through the stream, cold, clean, not stagnant. Drain system, he murmured. Not just drainage. Control. The beam of his flashlight swept forward, revealing sections of the wall where metal brackets had once held something. Pipes, maybe, or storage units. Most of it was gone now. Removed. Not destroyed. Taken. Cade stood again, following the corridor deeper. The further he went, the more the structure revealed its purpose. This wasn't a hiding place built in panic. It was a system built with intention. A place meant to outlast something. Back above, Atlas had not moved from his position, but his ears shifted. Footsteps, light, controlled. Not Cade. The dog turned his head toward the tree line. A figure emerged between the trunks, moving without hurry. A woman. She stopped just at the edge of the clearing, studying the house before stepping forward. Elena Voss, 36, about 5'7", lean, built for movement rather than strength. Her moss-green ranger parka blended naturally with the forest, the fabric worn but maintained. Underneath, a gray knit sweater hugged close to her frame, practical against the cold. Dark outdoor pants, boots that had seen mud, roots, long hikes. Her chestnut-brown hair was pulled back loosely, strands escaping around her face. Her skin carried the faint roughness of someone who spent more time outside than in. But it was her eyes that defined her. Sharp, observant, always measuring. She didn't trust easily. That much was clear before she even spoke. Her gaze dropped to Atlas. The dog watched her, unblinking. They held that silent exchange for a few seconds. Then Elena spoke, her voice calm but firm. "You're not from here." Atlas didn't react, but he didn't step back either. Elena's eyes flicked to the open entrance beneath the house, then back to the dog. "You let him go down there alone?" No answer. She stepped closer, slow, careful, not afraid, but respectful of distance. She crouched slightly, just enough to lower herself without threatening. Atlas shifted, not retreating, not welcoming, judging. "You're trained," she said quietly, studying him. "Military, maybe. Definitely not local." Her eyes lifted again toward the dark opening. Then she stood. "He won't like me being here," she added under her breath. Still, she didn't leave. Below, Cade reached the end of the corridor. A small chamber opened up, wider than the passage, with a low ceiling and stone walls reinforced with metal plating in certain sections. The air felt heavier here. In the center sat a rectangular object, half buried in silt and debris. A container. Steel. Cade approached carefully, scanning the room first. No movement, no fresh disturbance, just time layered over intention. He crouched, brushing away the grime. The box was sealed, not locked in any conventional sense, but secured with pressure clasps. Old, rusted, but intact, waterproof. He hesitated for a second, not out of fear, out of instinct. Then he opened it. The sound wasn't loud, just a soft release of pressure. But it echoed. Not in the room, in him, inside the box. Not money, not valuables. Paper, stacks of it. Sealed in plastic, layered carefully. Cade pulled one bundle free, slicing open the edge. Handwritten pages. His breath slowed. He knew that handwriting, his adoptive mother's. But the first line he read made his chest tighten, not with recognition, but with something colder. If anyone finds this, it means I waited too long. Not we. Not they. I. Cade froze, eyes scanning further. The words weren't organized. They were fragments, thoughts written over time, not meant to be read in sequence. Harlan said the system would hold. They came sooner than expected. I thought I could manage it. I was wrong. Cade's jaw tightened. This wasn't just observation. This was confession. Behind him, a faint shift. Not from the corridor, from above, a distant creak, barely audible. Cade's head turned sharply toward the staircase. For a moment, the past and present collided. Because for the first time since entering the structure, he felt like he wasn't alone. He stood slowly, flashlight cutting back toward the corridor. Nothing. Silence returned. But it wasn't empty anymore. He gathered the bundle of papers, resealed the container as best he could, then moved back toward the stairs. Faster now, controlled but no longer lingering. Above ground, Elena had stepped closer to the entrance. Not inside, just close enough to look. Atlas stood between her and the opening. Not aggressive, but firm. She crossed her arms, watching him. "You're not going to let me in, are you?" Atlas didn't move. Elena exhaled through her nose, almost amused. "Didn't think so." Then, footsteps from inside. Atlas turned instantly, tension snapping into place. Cade emerged seconds later, climbing up into the fading light. He stopped when he saw her. She didn't step back, didn't smile either. They looked at each other like two people who had already decided not to trust, but hadn't decided what to do about it. "You went in," she said. "Yeah. You shouldn't have." Cade studied her. "And you are?" "Elena Voss." She gestured vaguely toward the forest. "Ranger. This land falls under my watch, or what's left of it." Cade nodded once. "Cade Rowan." Her eyes flicked to the dog. "I figured." Silence stretched. Then she pointed toward the structure. "That place isn't just old wood and bad foundation. It's layered. Water systems, reinforced sections. Whoever built it knew exactly what they were doing. I noticed. And whatever they built it for," she paused, eyes narrowing slightly, "they didn't want it found easily." Cade held her gaze. "Or they wanted it found by the right person." Elena didn't smile, but something in her expression shifted. Not trust, not yet, but interest. The light was almost gone now. The forest darkened into deep blue shadow, shapes blending together. The house stood behind them, silent again. Cade looked once more at the entrance. Atlas stepped back beside him. Not blocking anymore, but not relaxed either. Just ready. Cade slipped the papers into his jacket. "We're not done here," he said quietly. Elena followed his gaze. "No," she replied. "We're just starting to understand how much we don't know." The forest answered with silence. And somewhere beneath their feet, water kept moving. Morning did not break cleanly over the forest. It seeped in. Thin light sliding between branches, touching the house in uneven patches, never fully claiming it. Cade stood on the edge of the clearing, arms folded loosely, the folded pages from the steel box tucked inside his field jacket. He hadn't slept much, not from fear, from alignment. Things were beginning to connect in ways he didn't like. Atlas stood beside him, posture neutral but alert, nose working the air in slow, deliberate pulls. The dog no longer stared at the house the way he had the day before. Now he moved in small arcs, tracing invisible threads only he could follow. Elena approached from the tree line, boots quiet on damp soil. She had tied her hair tighter today. The chestnut strands pulled back into a low knot, her face sharper in the morning light. There was less distance in her expression now, but not trust. Not yet. Just purpose. "You're heading out," she said, glancing at the trail that curved away from the clearing. Cade nodded once. "There's someone I need to find." Elias Wren. He looked at her, not surprised. "You know him. I know of him." She crossed her arms, shifting her weight. "He doesn't talk to people anymore. Hasn't in years." "People still try?" Elena gave a faint shrug. "Not the ones who want answers. They stopped a long time ago." Cade adjusted the strap of his pack slightly, though it carried little. He didn't need much. "I'm not asking for answers," he said. Elena's eyes lingered on him for a second. "That's not how it works with him." Cade didn't respond. He just started walking. Atlas followed immediately. After a brief hesitation, Elena fell in step behind them. The cabin sat near a shallow ridge, where the forest thinned just enough to let in more light. It was smaller than Cade expected. Wooden, weathered, but intact. Smoke did not rise from the chimney. No sound came from inside, but it was lived in. You could tell by the small things. A stack of cut wood near the side, a bucket half filled with rainwater, a set of worn boots left just outside the door, toes pointed outward as if their owner expected to step back into them soon. Cade approached slowly, stopping just short of the door. Atlas moved ahead of him. The dog didn't bark, didn't scratch. He simply sat, waiting. There was a long pause. Then the door creaked open. Elias Wren stood in the doorway like a man who had forgotten how to be seen. 74, maybe a little older. His frame was thin, shoulders slightly hunched, not from weakness, but from years of bending inward. His hair, once dark, had faded into a brittle white gray, thinning at the crown but still uncut, falling unevenly around his ears. His face was carved with deep lines, creases not just from age, but from restraint, from things not said. His eyes, though, they were clear, sharp in a way that didn't match the rest of him. They moved past Cade, to Atlas, and for the first time since Cade had known him, Atlas lowered his head. Not submission, recognition. Elias exhaled slowly, something shifting behind his eyes. "I wondered if one would come back," he murmured. Cade studied him carefully. "You've seen dogs like him before?" Elias nodded faintly. Not like him, but close enough. His voice was rough, not from disuse, but from something heavier, like every word had to pass through something before it could leave. Elena stepped forward slightly. "Elias, this is—" "I know who he is," Elias cut in quietly, his gaze returning to Cade. "You have her eyes, not the color. The way they measure before they trust." Cade didn't react outwardly. Inside, something tightened. "You knew her," he said. Elias stepped back, opening the door wider. "I knew more than I should have." Inside, the cabin was simple. One room divided loosely by function rather than walls. A small table near the center, a chair worn smooth by use, a narrow bed against the far side. Tools hung neatly along one wall, old but maintained. Not for show, for necessity. Elias moved slowly, but not weakly. Every step had intent. He gestured to the table. "Sit." Cade remained standing. Elena leaned against the wall instead. Atlas lay down near the doorway. But his eyes never left Elias. The old man noticed. "They don't forget," he said quietly. "Even when we do." Cade reached into his jacket, pulling out a single folded page. He placed it on the table, sliding it forward. Elias didn't touch it. Didn't need to. His eyes moved over the handwriting without reading, like he already knew what it said. She wrote too much toward the end, he said. When silence starts breaking, it doesn't stop clean. Cade's jaw tightened slightly. She wasn't just watching, was she? Elias finally looked at him. No. Silence settled in the room, not uncomfortable, just heavy. She handled the numbers, Elias continued after a moment. The funding, the transfers, the things no one pays attention to, until they need to. For the project, Elena added quietly. Elias nodded once. Harlan's project, yes, but also for the men who wanted it. Cade's eyes narrowed slightly. They approached him. They pressured him, Elias corrected. Then they waited. Because men like that don't rush what they can own later. Atlas stood up suddenly. No sound. No warning. He moved past Cade, straight to Elias. The old man didn't flinch. Atlas stopped just inches from him, head tilted slightly, nostrils flaring. Then, slowly, he lowered his head and pressed his nose against Elias's hand. Not searching, not investigating, touching. Elias froze. His fingers twitched, then stilled. For a moment his face broke, just slightly. A crack in something held too long. They used to do that, he whispered, voice barely there, when they knew someone was about to leave. Or had already decided. Cade felt it then. Not the words, the weight behind them. Atlas stepped back, but the silence he left behind stayed. Elias moved away from the table, pacing once across the small room before stopping near the window. He didn't look outside. He looked at his reflection. Harlan wasn't building something to sell, he said. He was building something to outlast. Cade listened. Elena's right about the system. The water channels, the soil layers. He designed it to clean itself. Not just the land, the runoff from everything around it. Industry, waste, things that don't belong in water. Elena stepped forward slightly. A self-sustaining filtration ecosystem. Elias nodded. One that couldn't be owned the way they wanted. So they took him out, Cade said flatly. Elias shook his head once. No, they tried to take the work first. He wouldn't give it. That's when things... He paused. Shifted. Cade leaned forward slightly. What happened the night he disappeared? Elias didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at Atlas again, then at Cade. You think the worst thing that happened that night was that a man vanished, he said quietly. Cade didn't respond. Elias's voice dropped lower. It wasn't. The room felt smaller. She was there, Elias continued. The girl, Ivy. She wasn't supposed to be. But Harlan, he couldn't leave her alone that night. Not with what was coming. Cade's fingers tightened slightly against the edge of the table. They came earlier than expected, Elias said. Men who don't like delays. Men who think time belongs to them. And your role? Cade asked. Elias met his gaze. I stayed. Not defense, not explanation, just truth. I thought I could control the situation, he went on. Keep things from breaking. But control is a lie we tell ourselves when we're afraid to act. Elena's expression hardened slightly. And Cade's mother? She asked. Elias closed his eyes for a brief second. She made a choice. Cade didn't breathe. She tried to protect the work, Elias said. Tried to delay them. Tried to buy time. And? Elias opened his eyes. She closed a door. The words landed without force. But they didn't need it. She thought she was keeping them out, he added quietly. She didn't realize who she was keeping in. Silence followed. Heavy, unavoidable. Cade stood slowly. Not in anger, not yet. But something inside him shifted. She knew, he said. Not a question. Elias didn't deny it. She knew enough to regret it, he said. Not enough to fix it. Atlas moved closer to Cade, brushing lightly against his leg, grounding, present. Cade looked down at him for a second, then back at Elias. And the girl? Elias's gaze flickered, just for a moment, then steadied. She didn't disappear the way people think, he said. That was all. But it was enough, because for the first time, this wasn't a story about something that ended. It was a story about something left unfinished. Outside, the forest seemed brighter, or maybe Cade just saw it differently now. He stepped away from the cabin, Elena beside him, Atlas moving slightly ahead. No one spoke for a while. Finally, Elena broke the silence. You believe him? Cade didn't answer immediately. He watched Atlas move, the dog pausing at certain points along the path, adjusting direction slightly each time. Not random. Never random. I believe, Cade said slowly, that whatever happened isn't done yet. Elena nodded once. That was enough. Behind them, Elias stood in the doorway, watching. Not calling them back, not stopping them, just watching. Like a man who had already made his choice long ago, and now had to live with what came after. The forest held its breath that afternoon. Not in silence, but in restraint. The kind that came before something gave way. Cade stood at the edge of the greenhouse ruins, hands resting loosely at his sides, though nothing in him was relaxed. The structure leaned inward like a broken rib cage, its glass panels shattered or clouded by years of moisture and moss. Vines had crept through the frame, weaving themselves into the skeleton of the building as if trying to stitch it back together. But beneath the decay, the design was still visible. Intentional. Precise. Elena moved ahead of him, stepping carefully over warped planks and rusted metal supports. Her movements were efficient, controlled. Someone used to reading unstable terrain. Her boots barely made a sound as she shifted her weight across a tilted beam. This wasn't just a greenhouse, she said, her voice low, almost thoughtful. Look at the layout. The irrigation lines. See how they angle downward? Cade followed her gaze. The ground sloped slightly toward the center, where a depression had formed over time. The soil there was darker, more saturated. Not random pooling, engineered flow. He was moving water through this, Elena continued, filtering it, probably through layered plant beds, natural purification. Cade didn't answer immediately. His eyes moved past the visible, to what wasn't. Atlas circled slowly along the outer edge of the structure, nose low, tracing the boundaries like a map only he could read. His movements weren't frantic. They were deliberate, controlled. Then he stopped, near what looked like nothing more than a collapsed section of floor. Cade stepped closer. What is it? Atlas didn't look at him. He lowered his head and inhaled once, deep. Then he shifted slightly to the side, making space. Cade crouched, brushing away debris, rotted wood, damp leaves, a layer of soil that had settled over time. Beneath it, something solid resisted his touch. Stone. Flat, too flat. Elena, he called. She came over, kneeling beside him. Together, they cleared more of the surface, revealing a rectangular slab, its edges faintly outlined by seams that had been hidden well. A hatch, she said quietly. Or something like it. They worked in silence after that. It took effort. The slab had weight, and time had sealed it in place. But eventually, it shifted. Just enough. Cold air rushed up from below, Not stale. Not dead. Moving. Cade glanced at Atlas. The dog stood still, watching. Not stepping forward, not stepping back. Waiting. Cade pried the slab open. Darkness answered. The descent this time was steeper. A ladder, not stairs, bolted into reinforced stone. The metal was corroded but intact, built to endure. Cade tested each rung before trusting his weight to it. Elena followed without hesitation. Below, the space opened into something larger than either of them expected. Not a corridor. A chamber. The walls were lined with shelving units. Many of them collapsed, their contents scattered or lost to time. But others remained intact. Sealed containers, stacked neatly, protected by layers of plastic and insulation. At the center stood a table, and on it, a device. Old, dust-covered, but unmistakable. A video recorder. Cade approached slowly, his breath steady, but his chest tight. "This is it," Elena murmured. "This is where he kept the real work." Cade reached out, brushing dust from the surface of the device. The power source was dead, but the casing had been preserved. "Help me find a backup," he said. They searched the room carefully. It didn't take long. A secondary unit, portable, sealed, rested inside a reinforced case beneath the table. Cade opened it, revealing a compact playback screen. He hesitated. Not from doubt, from knowing. Then he powered it on. The screen flickered. Static. Then, a face appeared. Dr. Harlan Wren. He was older than in the photograph, his hair thinner, his face more lined, but the same intensity burned in his eyes. He sat at the same table they now stood beside, shoulders squared, gaze fixed forward. "If you're watching this," he began, voice calm but strained beneath the surface, "then I failed to keep this contained." Elena shifted slightly beside Cade. "They came earlier than expected," Wren continued, "not with force, but with certainty. They believed time was already on their side." The recording cut briefly, then resumed. "Ivy is safe, for now. I've moved her to the secondary passage. She knows to stay quiet. She understands more than she should." Cade's jaw tightened. The screen flickered again. Wren leaned closer this time, his voice lower. "They want the system, not to preserve it, but to control it. To patent what cannot be owned." A sound echoed faintly in the background of the recording. Not from the room, from outside. Rain, heavy, relentless. The video glitched. The image distorted for a split second. Then shifted. A different angle. A second recording. Not Wren. A woman. Cade froze. His adoptive mother. Younger but unmistakable. Her posture rigid, her expression tighter than he had ever seen it. She stood in the same room, near the same table. But something in her eyes was different. Not calm. Pressed. "I don't have time," she said, voice sharper than he remembered. "They're already inside the perimeter. Harlan thinks he can reason with them. He's wrong." The camera trembled slightly. She turned, looking off screen. "I'm sealing the lower access," she continued. "It's the only way to delay them." Her hand reached toward something out of frame. She paused, just for a second. A hesitation so small it almost didn't exist. Then, "I'll open it again once they're gone." The recording cut. Cade didn't move, didn't breathe, because in that moment, he understood. Not just what she had done, but when. The main recording resumed. Chaos now. The sound of something breaking above, water rushing, voices, muffled, urgent, overlapping. Wren's face appeared again, closer to the camera. "They're forcing entry," he said quickly. "I don't have time." The screen shook violently. Then, darkness. The room fell silent. Not empty, heavy. Elena exhaled slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. She thought she was protecting him. Cade didn't answer. He stared at the blank screen, his reflection faint in the dark glass. She closed the only exit, Elena continued. The lower passage. If he was still down here. He was trapped, Cade finished. The words didn't sound like his. They sounded distant. Atlas moved closer, not fast, not urgent. He sat beside Cade, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. No sound, no gesture, just presence. Cade's hand tightened slightly against his knee. Not shaking, but not still either. She knew, he said quietly. Elena didn't argue. She knew enough to make the choice, she said. Not enough to understand the cost. Cade closed his eyes briefly. A memory flickered. His adoptive mother at the kitchen table, counting bills, organizing papers, her movements precise. Controlled. Always controlled. Now he saw it differently. Not control. Containment. A sudden sound snapped them both back. Above, a crack, sharp, followed by another. Elena looked up instantly. That's not structural decay. Cade was already moving. Someone's here. Atlas stood in one motion, body tightening, ears forward. They moved toward the ladder, fast, controlled. Cade climbed first, pulling himself up through the opening into the greenhouse remains. The light had shifted. Darker. But not from the sun. Smoke. Thin at first, but growing. Elena, he called down. Move! She climbed quickly, emerging just as the smell intensified. Burning, not natural, not accidental. Flames licked along one side of the structure, feeding on the driest remains of wood and creeping vines. It wasn't a wildfire. It was placed, directed. Cade scanned the perimeter. No one visible. But the fire. It had started at multiple points. Elena grabbed his arm. We have to get out. This whole structure could collapse. Cade hesitated. Just for a second. Then he turned back toward the opening. The recorder. No time. I'm not leaving it. Atlas barked once. Sharp. Cade looked at him. The dog wasn't facing the fire. He was looking toward the far edge of the clearing. Alert. Focused. Someone was still out there. Watching. Cade made the call. Go! He grabbed the backup unit, shoving it into his jacket, then followed Elena and Atlas out of the structure as the flames surged higher behind them. Wood cracked. Glass shattered. The greenhouse groaned like something alive being torn apart. They didn't stop running until they reached the tree line. Only then did Cade turn back. The fire consumed the structure now, smoke rising into the sky in dark spirals. Not random, not wild, deliberate. Someone had tried to erase it, erase everything. Cade's expression hardened. Not anger, not yet. Something colder, more precise. They know, Elena said quietly. Cade nodded once. They always did. Atlas stood at his side, gaze still fixed on the burning structure. But Cade knew. The fire wasn't what held the dog's attention. It was what had just slipped away into the trees. Unseen, unfinished. The fire had burned itself into silence by morning. Smoke still clung to the trees in thin gray ribbons, rising lazily into a sky that looked too clean for what had happened beneath it. The greenhouse was no longer a structure, just a blackened skeleton, warped beams leaning inward. Glass melted into jagged shapes that caught the light like broken mirrors. Cade stood at the edge of it, unmoving. His olive jacket carried the faint scent of smoke now. It would stay there. He didn't bother brushing it off. Atlas moved carefully through the perimeter, nose low, stepping around charred wood and brittle ash. The dog's coat remained clean, but his movements had sharpened. Less exploratory now, more deliberate. Every step measured. Elena approached from behind, her boots crunching softly over gravel and debris. "You didn't sleep," she said. It wasn't a question. Cade didn't turn. "Did you?" She exhaled faintly. "No." Silence followed. Not uncomfortable. Just heavy with things neither of them had said yet. Cade finally stepped forward, crouching near the outer edge of the burned structure. He brushed aside a layer of ash, revealing darker soil beneath. "Accelerant," he muttered. Elena knelt beside him. "You're sure?" He nodded once. Pattern's wrong for natural spread. It climbed too fast, too clean. She glanced toward the tree line. So whoever came back didn't just watch. They acted. Atlas stopped suddenly, not far from where they stood. His head lifted, ears forward, body angled toward a section of ground just beyond the burned area. He didn't bark, didn't move closer. He froze. Cade noticed immediately. He stood, stepping toward the dog. "What is it?" Atlas didn't respond. But he didn't step forward either. He just held position. Cade frowned slightly. Then he stepped past him. The ground looked stable, just soil and debris, softened by moisture, but not obviously dangerous. Cade tested it with his boot. Firm. He shifted his weight forward. "Cade?" Elena's voice was sharp, but he didn't stop. Another step. Then a crack. Not loud, but deep. The ground beneath his foot gave slightly. Cade froze. Atlas moved. Not forward, sideways, placing himself directly in front of Cade, blocking him. The dog's body was rigid now, muscles tight, eyes locked, not on Cade, but on the ground ahead. "Back," Elena said quietly. Cade didn't argue this time. He shifted his weight backwards slowly, step by step. The moment his foot left the unstable section, the ground collapsed. Wood snapped beneath the surface, hidden beams breaking under their own rot. The earth sank inward, revealing a hollow space below, dark, jagged, unstable. Elena let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "That would have taken you down." Cade stared at the opening, then at Atlas. The dog stood still again. Not proud, not relieved, just certain. Cade exhaled slowly. "Yeah," he said under his breath. This time it wasn't directed at the dog. It was directed at himself. They circled the collapse carefully, finding a safer approach. The exposed cavity revealed more than just structural decay. It revealed intent. Support beams had once reinforced the area beneath the greenhouse. Deliberate construction, now weakened over time. But among the debris, something else caught Elena's eye. "Wait," she said, crouching. She reached into the edge of the collapse, pulling free a piece of fabric caught between splintered wood. Small, faded, child-sized. Cade took it from her hand, turning it over. Soft material, worn thin with time. The stitching along one edge was uneven, as if repaired more than once. Atlas stepped closer this time, lowering his nose toward the fabric. He inhaled. Once. Then again. Longer, deeper. His posture shifted, not tense, not alarmed, but focused in a way Cade had learned to recognize. Connection. "This isn't just debris," Elena said quietly. "This was worn." Cade nodded slightly. "By a kid," he said. The word hung in the air longer than it should have. They didn't speak much on the way back to town. The road felt different now, not because it had changed, because Cade had. He drove slower, hands steady on the wheel, eyes fixed ahead. Atlas sat beside him, calm but alert. his presence grounding in a way Cade hadn't allowed himself to rely on before. Elena broke the silence first. "There's something you need to see," she said. Cade glanced at her briefly. "What?" She hesitated, not from uncertainty, but from weighing how much to say. "Records," she said finally. "County archives, missing persons, unidentified minors, cases that don't line up clean." Cade's grip on the wheel tightened slightly. "You think she's in there?" "I think if she wasn't officially recorded," Elena replied, "then she exists somewhere between files." The building wasn't what Cade expected. No grand courthouse, no modern office. Just a modest, aging structure at the edge of town. Its white paint faded, its windows slightly fogged from years of temperature shifts. Inside, the air smelled like paper. Old paper, dust, time. Behind a long wooden desk sat a woman who looked like she had been part of that building longer than the furniture itself. Nora Bell. 44, maybe 45. Medium height, slender frame, posture slightly curved from years spent leaning over files. Her hair, a soft brown with hints of gray, was pulled into a loose bun at the back of her head. Strands escaped around her face, framing features that were neither soft nor hard. Just observant. Her eyes were the kind that noticed patterns others ignored. She looked up as they entered. "You're not from around here," she said, her voice calm, not unfriendly, but not welcoming either. Cade stepped forward, looking for records. Nora studied him for a moment, her gaze lingering just long enough to read more than his words. "Everyone who comes in here is looking for something," she said. "Few of them find what they think they're going to." Elena stepped beside him. "We need access to historical intake records, around 20 years back." Nora's expression shifted slightly. Not resistance, interest. "That far back," she said slowly, "things get less organized." "Or more intentionally misplaced," Elena replied. A faint smile touched Nora's lips. "You've been here before." "Enough." Nora stood, moving around the desk with quiet efficiency. "Come on, then." The archive room was colder than the rest of the building, not by temperature alone. Rows of shelves stretched into dim corners, filled with boxes, folders, files that had been handled, forgotten, handled again. Nora moved through them without hesitation, her fingers brushing labels without needing to read them fully. "This is where things end up when no one wants to decide what they are," she said. She stopped at a lower shelf, pulling out a thin box. "Unidentified minors," she added. Cade stepped closer. Nora opened the box. Inside, files. Dozens of them. Some thin, some thicker, all incomplete. She handed one to Cade. No name, just a date, a description, female, approximately 8 years old. Found near roadside, disoriented. No identification. Cade's chest tightened slightly. Elena leaned in. "That matches." Nora nodded. "It's not the only one." She pulled another file, and another. Then, she paused, her fingers resting on a folder slightly more worn than the others. "This one," she said slowly. Cade watched her. Nora opened it. Inside, clipped to the front, a photograph. Faded, but clear enough. A girl, light brown hair, eyes fixed on something just outside the frame. Cade didn't need to turn it over. He already knew the name. Nora looked at him carefully. "You recognize her?" It wasn't a question. Cade nodded once. "She was processed under temporary designation," Nora continued. "No official identity, no follow-up after initial placement." "Placement?" Elena asked. Nora closed the file halfway. "Emergency transfer. Out of county. Happens when paperwork doesn't line up fast enough." Cade's voice was steady. "Where did she go?" Nora hesitated. Not because she didn't know, because she understood what it meant. "I can't access that without—" "Try," Elena said quietly. Nora held her gaze, then sighed, turning back toward the deeper shelves. "I'll see what's still there." Cade stood still, the file in his hand. Atlas moved closer, sitting beside him, not looking at the file, looking at Cade, as if waiting, not for an answer, for a decision. Cade exhaled slowly. Not everything could be controlled. Not every step could be predicted. But some things could be trusted. He looked down at the dog, then back at the file. "All right," he said quietly. Not to Elena, not to Nora, to himself. "This time, we do it your way." Atlas didn't move. But something in his posture shifted, just slightly, like a weight had been acknowledged. The forest did not change, but Cade did. By the time they left the records building, the light had shifted toward late afternoon, stretching shadows across the town like something reaching. Cade walked ahead without speaking, the thin file containing Ivy's record tucked inside his jacket, close to his chest. Atlas stayed close this time, not circling, not testing, just beside him. Elena kept pace a step behind, watching both man and dog with a quieter kind of attention now, less guarded, more aware. "You know where to go," she said after a while. Cade didn't answer immediately. He looked down at Atlas. The dog didn't look back. He was already moving, slightly ahead, nose low, following something invisible. "I don't," Cade said finally. "He does?" They reached the house just as the last light brushed the treetops. The burned greenhouse had cooled into silence, blackened beams standing like ribs against the fading sky. The air still carried the faint scent of smoke. But something else had begun to surface beneath it again. Damp earth. Cold water. The forest reclaiming what had been disturbed. Cade didn't stop. He moved past the ruins, toward the collapsed section they had uncovered earlier. The ground there had settled slightly, but the opening remained, dark, jagged, leading down into something unfinished. Elena hesitated only briefly before following. Atlas reached the edge first. He didn't jump. He didn't hesitate. He descended, carefully, sure-footed, as if he had always known this way. Cade followed. The air below was colder than before, not just cool, dense, pressed. The space they entered was different from the previous chamber, narrower, more confined. The walls here weren't reinforced with metal or shelving. They were raw stone, rough, natural. "This wasn't part of the main structure," Elena whispered, her voice echoing faintly. "This is older." Cade nodded slightly. "Secondary passage," he said. "Built fast. Meant to move, not stay." Atlas moved ahead, his pace steady. He didn't pause now, didn't circle. He followed a single direction, his body aligned with something deeper than scent alone. Cade noticed, but he didn't question it. Not anymore. The passage sloped downward, then curved. Water ran along one side again, but faster here, cutting through the stone with a quiet persistence. The sound filled the space, not loud, but constant. A reminder. Movement never stopped, even when everything else did. Cade's boot slipped once on a wet patch, but he adjusted quickly. Elena moved with more caution, one hand brushing the wall for balance. "How far does this go?" she asked. Cade shook his head. "Far enough." That was the only answer that mattered. They reached a junction. Two paths. One narrow, almost sealed by fallen rock. The other wider, but darker. Atlas stopped. For the first time since entering, he hesitated. His head turned slightly, left, then right. Testing. Reading. Cade stood behind him, waiting. No command, no push, just trust. After a moment, Atlas turned toward the narrower path, the one that looked almost impossible. Elena frowned. That way barely holds. Cade stepped forward. Then we moved slow. They had gone no more than 10 steps when Atlas stopped again. Not gradual, immediate. His body went rigid. Then he stepped backward, once, twice, until he pressed against Cade's leg. Cade froze. Not because of fear, because of recognition. This wasn't caution. This was refusal. Cade looked ahead. At first there was nothing. Just rock. Then a faint glint. Metal, half buried beneath debris. Cade crouched slowly, brushing away dirt and small stones. A cable, thin, tensioned, running across the narrow path at ankle height. Elena's breath caught slightly. That's not old. Cade's eyes hardened. No. He followed the line with his gaze. It disappeared into the wall. Improvised, recent. Someone had set it, not to warn, to trigger. He looked down at Atlas. The dog didn't move, didn't relax, just held position. Cade exhaled slowly. You saved us again. Atlas didn't react, but the space between them shifted. Just enough. Cade carefully stepped over the wire, guiding Elena behind him. They moved slower now, not because the path demanded it. Because someone else had been here, recently, and they hadn't come to preserve anything. The tunnel opened suddenly, not into a room, into space, a natural cavern carved by water over years, maybe decades. The ceiling rose higher here, allowing their breath to expand again. Light filtered faintly from somewhere above, thin and distant. At the far end, an opening. Not large, but clear, a way out. Cade moved toward it, his steps measured. Atlas followed close. Elena stayed just behind. Halfway across the cavern, a voice. Stop there. Calm, controlled, not raised, but final. Cade didn't turn immediately. He already knew. Declan Shaw stepped into view from the shadow near the opening. He looked unchanged. Even here, even underground. His charcoal coat was clean, untouched by dirt or moisture. His posture straight, composed. His face, sharp, controlled, carried no sign of urgency, only intention. Behind him stood another man, younger, broader, wearing outdoor gear that blended more with the environment. Dark jacket, boots, gloves. His face was partially shadowed, but his stance was clear. Security. Cade turned slowly. Figured you'd come down here yourself eventually, Declan said, his tone almost conversational. You always seemed like the type who needed to see things personally. Cade didn't respond. Elena stepped slightly to the side, eyes scanning the space. End of the line, Declan continued. You found what there is to find. No need to make it more complicated. Cade's gaze didn't waver. You burned the greenhouse. Declan's expression didn't change. Some things don't need to remain. Truth does. A faint smile touched Declan's lips. That depends on who benefits from it. The space tightened. Not physically, mentally. Cade stepped forward. Just one step. The guard shifted slightly. Not aggressive, ready. Atlas moved. Not forward, sideways, positioning. Cade felt it. Adjusted. No words, no signals. Just instinct aligning. The confrontation didn't explode. It shifted. Cade moved first, not with speed, but with precision. One step angled, forcing the guard to adjust his stance. Atlas reacted instantly, cutting low across the man's path, forcing a misstep. The guard stumbled, not falling, but losing balance. That was enough. Cade closed the distance, disarming him in a single motion. No excess movement, no wasted energy. The man hit the ground hard, breath knocked from him. Declan didn't move, didn't react. He simply watched. "Efficient," he said quietly. Cade turned toward him. "You could have walked away," Declan added. "You still can." Cade's voice was calm. "No." Declan tilted his head slightly. "Because of him?" he asked, glancing briefly at Atlas. "Or because of what you think this means?" Cade didn't answer. Declan stepped back once, hands lowering slightly, not in surrender, but in acknowledgement. "You think you're restoring something," he said. "Fixing a mistake." His eyes met Cade's. "You're not." The words hung in the air, cold, certain. "I'm preserving what works," Declan continued. "Control, structure, ownership. Things your Dr. Wren refused to understand." Cade stepped closer. "And that's why you failed." Declan smiled faintly. "No," he said. "That's why I'm still here." A sound echoed from the tunnel behind them. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate. Owen Pike appeared at the entrance, his silhouette filling the space behind them. 57. Broad, worn, carrying the weight of years not in his posture, but in his eyes. His sheriff's jacket hung open, his badge catching the faint light. He didn't rush, didn't shout. He just walked forward, stopping a few steps inside. His gaze moved from Cade to Declan and stayed there. "Should have known it'd be you," Owen said quietly. Declan didn't seem surprised. "You always knew," he replied. Owen's jaw tightened slightly. "Yeah," he said. "I did." Silence followed, heavy, final. Owen stepped forward, one step, then another. Not this time. Declan didn't resist, not physically. As Owen moved to restrain him, he simply watched Cade. No anger, no fear, just conviction. "You don't understand what you've started," he said quietly. Cade met his gaze. "I don't need to." Declan's expression didn't change. "That's the problem." Atlas stood beside Cade, still, focused, not on Declan, not on Owen, but on the opening beyond, the way out, the path forward. The town did not celebrate the truth. It fractured under it. News spread quickly, but not cleanly. It moved through conversations, half spoken and half avoided, carried in lowered voices and glances that lingered too long. The arrest of Declan Shaw didn't bring relief. It brought exposure. People remembered things they had chosen to forget, or worse, things they had never questioned. Cade stood outside the small courthouse the morning it became official. His posture was steady, shoulders squared beneath the olive field jacket that had followed him through every step of this journey. His face remained unreadable, but his eyes, they had changed. Not softer, clearer. Atlas sat beside him, body relaxed but alert, his deep gaze scanning the edges of the crowd rather than the center. He wasn't interested in the people speaking. He was watching the spaces between them. Elena stood a few feet away, speaking quietly with Owen Pike. The sheriff looked older than he had even days ago. Not physically, his broad frame still held its ground, but in the way his shoulders carried something heavier now. Responsibility. "I've turned everything over," Owen was saying, his voice low, measured. "State investigators, environmental agencies, they're going to tear through every inch of this." Elena nodded. "They should." Owen exhaled slowly. "Yeah, they should have a long time ago." His eyes drifted briefly toward Cade. "I don't expect thanks," he added. Elena shook her head slightly. "That's not why you did it." "No," Owen said. "It isn't." The project was frozen within 48 hours. Legal notices went up. Boundaries were drawn. The land that had once been ignored was now under scrutiny, every inch of it mapped, studied, documented. Dr. Wren's work, what remained of it, was no longer hidden. It was contested. That was the part no one talked about openly. Because even with the truth revealed, there were still those who believed it should have been handled differently. Controlled. Contained. Sold. Cade didn't involve himself in those conversations. He had done what he came to do. Or at least, what he thought he had. It was Elena who found the final thread. 3 days after the arrest, she stood at the edge of the old records building, a folder in her hand, her expression more focused than Cade had seen before. "I found the transfer," she said as he approached. Cade stopped a few feet away. "Where?" "Out of state," she replied. "Emergency placement. No name attached, just an intake code and a receiving institution." "Which one?" Elena hesitated, then handed him the file. "Private care facility. Closed down 12 years ago." Cade read the line once, then again. "Any records after that?" "Minimal," she said, "but enough." He looked up. "She didn't disappear," Elena added. "She was reassigned. New identity." Cade's chest tightened slightly. "And now?" Elena met his gaze. "She's still out there." Her name wasn't Ivy anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. She lived 2 states over, in a small town that didn't make the news for anything important. The kind of place where people came when they wanted quiet, not attention. Cade didn't expect recognition. He didn't expect memory. What he wasn't prepared for was the feeling. They saw her before she saw them. She stood near the edge of a narrow road, a small wooden fence behind her, fields stretching beyond in muted greens and golds. The wind moved through her hair, light brown, longer now, falling past her shoulders in uneven waves. She wasn't fragile, but there was something in the way she stood, slightly turned inward, like someone who had learned to take up less space without realizing it. 26, maybe 28, hard to tell. Time had shaped her differently. Her face carried no clear memory of the past. But her eyes held distance. Not emptiness, just something missing. Atlas stopped walking, not abruptly, gradually, as if something inside him had aligned. Cade felt it, didn't question it, didn't rush it. They approached slowly. She turned when she heard them, and for a moment, nothing happened. No recognition, no reaction, just a polite, guarded look. "Can I help you?" she asked. Her voice was soft, steady. Cade opened his mouth, then stopped, because Atlas moved. The dog stepped forward, slow, deliberate, not invading her space, not demanding attention. He stopped just within reach, and sat, the same way he had that first day at Elias's door, waiting. The woman's eyes dropped to him. Something shifted, not in her expression, deeper. Her hand moved without instruction, fingers brushing lightly against the top of Atlas's head. The dog didn't move, didn't react. He simply leaned into the contact. Just enough. And in that moment, something broke. Not loudly, not visibly, but real. Her breath caught slightly, her fingers stilled. She said softly, her voice uncertain now. "That's strange." Cade watched her carefully. "What is?" he asked. She hesitated, then shook her head, almost dismissing it. "Nothing, just feels familiar." She pulled her hand back slightly, studying Atlas again. "I've never seen him before," she added quietly. Atlas looked up at her, and for the first time, he made a sound. Not a bark, not a whine, something softer, almost recognition. Her name now was Lena Hart, a name given to her, not chosen. She lived alone, worked at a small local library, kept routines that didn't invite disruption. Her life was quiet, structured, contained, safe, but not complete. Cade didn't tell her everything, not at once. Some truths had to be approached, not delivered. They spoke for a long time, about small things first, where she grew up, what she remembered, which was very little before a certain age. 8, she said, frowning slightly. That's when things start making sense. Before that, it's just pieces. Cade nodded. That matched. Everything. Elena filled in the gaps carefully, explaining just enough to open the door without forcing it wide. And through it all, Atlas stayed close, not guarding, not watching, present. When they returned to the house days later, Lena walked slower than the others, not out of fear, out of something harder to define. Recognition without memory. The structure stood as it always had, aged, rooted, imperfect, but no longer silent. Not entirely. Lena stepped onto the edge of the clearing, her gaze moving over the house, the ground, the water beneath. She didn't speak, didn't ask questions. She just stood. Then slowly, she moved toward the water. Cade watched her, didn't interfere. Atlas followed at a distance, not leading, not guiding, allowing. She knelt at the edge, her reflection breaking across the surface. Her fingers hovered just above it, then touched. The water rippled outward, and something in her expression shifted. Not memory, not fully, but feeling. "I've been here," she whispered. Not a question, a statement. Cade exhaled slowly. "Yes," he said. "You have." Time moved differently after that. The house didn't become new, it didn't heal all at once. But it changed. Work began. Not reconstruction, but restoration. Careful, intentional. Elena coordinated with the environmental teams, preserving what could still function of Wren's system. Owen ensured the legal boundaries held firm, no longer bending under pressure. And Cade, he stayed. Not because he had nowhere else to go, but because this place, this unfinished story, was no longer something he could walk away from. At the end of it all, he stood again where he had first arrived. At the edge of the water, Atlas beside him. The surface was still, but different. Not empty, reflective. Cade looked down. For the first time, he didn't see distortion. He saw the sky, clear, open, and beneath it, something deeper, a shadow, faint, unresolved, not threatening, not urgent, just there, a reminder that some things the forest didn't give back, not completely. Cade nodded slightly as if acknowledging it. Not everything had to be uncovered. Not everything had to be solved. Some things were meant to remain. Sometimes the miracles we wait for don't arrive as light from the sky or voices in the wind. They come quietly, through a loyal companion who refuses to leave, through a second chance we didn't believe we deserved, through a truth that finally finds its way back to the surface after years of silence. In this story, nothing was truly lost. It was simply waiting for the right moment, the right heart, and the courage to face it. And maybe that's how God works in our lives too. Not by removing every darkness, but by placing just enough light in front of us to take the next step, and trusting that we will follow it. Cade didn't save the past. He didn't undo every mistake. But he chose to stand, to listen, and to do what was right when it mattered most. And sometimes, that is the miracle. When a person decides not to turn away anymore. If you've ever felt like something in your life was broken beyond repair, or that a piece of your story was lost forever, maybe it's not gone. Maybe it's waiting for you to come back to it with faith, with courage, and with a heart that's willing to see again. Take a moment today to reflect on your own life. Is there something you've been avoiding? Something unfinished? Something that still calls to you in quiet ways? If this story touched you, share it with someone who might need to hear it. Leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from and what part of the story stayed with you the most. And don't forget to subscribe to Veteran Dog Stories for more journeys of loyalty, truth, and redemption. May God watch over you, guide your steps through every unknown path, and bless you with peace, strength, and the courage to keep going, even when the road is quiet and unclear, even when the road is